Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. So, still with I don't know, the wacky Brozo is now arguing with a couple other people about the fact that somehow the rotational inertia problem that was obvious in his experiment is somehow not a problem. So even though it's visually obvious, frankly, that the two masses aren't configured the same way, he's going to try to reclamate, which is just typical of an idiot. Okay, and then we have Ian Gostling has done his drawing. Okay, and it's not much of a drawing, frankly. I mean, it's not that so much the drawing doesn't do what it needs to do. It's not consistent. So that's the problem with it. All right, so we'll play it from halfway through where he is talking about the actual thick lever versus thin lever. Okay.
In equilibrium.
All right, so he starts off with just the simple idea that, okay, you have a force coming down on both sides, same force. You have the same distance from the object in terms of this distance in horizontal space. All right, we're really not counting the total length of the string. It doesn't really matter how long the strings are. Like I said, he drew it a little bit non-correct in the sense that both the masses are hanging in the same direction. They're both, and it's only when you lift the mass, okay, that you have this differential, and then you have to figure out from the new positions what would be the implications of that concerning these horizontal lines versus the force line, which is always the same. Technically, it's always the same mass, and it's hanging from this arm. And he basically just says you just calculate based on the arm length plus the force mass, and you just say that's your total amount. And it just, frankly, I don't think works. But okay, so we'll play what he says, and I'll try to say, okay, I don't think so. I think it really has to do with this fulcrum, the size of it. So the smaller you make it, the smaller the axle, the less likely you can create any circumstance where the lever stops in any position, where you could freeze the lever in an imbalanced condition. Because I think it's the change in the fulcrum's position, the center of the mass, that really causes the tilts. That the tilts are really just a reflection of the fact that you create a new balance in the wrong position. So for every inch you move down, you change the mass distribution in such a way as that it's actually measuring the change in the mass's distribution.
Doesn't oscillate. Doesn't oscillate.
Yeah, we got that. So you do it from the center and say it doesn't oscillate. Okay. Pulling on the center because there's no change in the balance. Okay, you could argue. Now the problem is if I change the balance.
Right.
So this is just basically illustrating you have a very thick lever. So the position from the top of the lever to the bottom of the lever is dramatically different. Obviously this line is much shorter than this line, and so now you've changed the length of the lines in a sense. The arm length based on how it rotates. Obviously that line is always the same from the exact fulcrum, but the rotation is changing the orientation of that line in some way. Now the only point I'll make is that if you tie it from the bottom, you get one answer. If you tie it from the top, it's exactly the opposite effect. That is, this side is getting further away, so to speak, when you're tied from the bottom. When you tie from the top, it's getting closer, and that's the real problem. That the two don't produce the same result. So in effect, if you put the weights on the top, it would work. Put the weights on the bottom, it wouldn't work, or vice versa. And it's really vice versa. The bottom works. If you put the weights on the top, it won't work.
This is getting a bit more tricky because
the wrong side gets lighter is the problem. Put it on the top, the wrong side gets lighter, so to speak.
All the lines now, it's confusing like this. This thing is my tube I had in my last video. if, as I had it, we hang the weights on this string from the centre of the tube, I drilled a hole looking down on.
Right, so we all know that part, right? So we put it so it's hanging from the center line. So instead we're going to hang it from the bottom or from the top. Now if I put a loop around here and then I tie another loop for the weight, it's technically putting the weight on the top, not the bottom. So there's lots of ways to try to figure out how you're hanging weights. Just for the argument, I mean, I took the weights off my lever, you know, so it has no weights on it. And there's no way to keep it in one position. So it just won't do that. It balances, okay, with no weights, which kind of, you know, to me, well, whatever the explanation is, it has to be an explanation that doesn't involve weights, I think. I mean, this weight on the center line thing.
On the plane of the paper through this tube, and measured again the line of action of the force. This is the line of action of the force. Measured that, and the perpendicular to the pivot point is the same as this one. Line of action of the force. A measurement from there to the.
Right, and so if they're equal, it means that even in the imbalanced condition, it's still the same distance. So if you do that math from the center line, it's the same distance on both sides. The problem is, again, if I attach to the bottom, okay, I get this differential in the difference, which accounts for the fact that it wants to go back to balance. But if I do it from the top, then I get the opposite effect, in the sense I get the differential in the reverse, which means it should be stuck where it's going, and it continues to go because the differential is exactly reversed. It doesn't want to go back to a true balance. It wants to just keep going down because it's getting heavier and heavier as you rotate it, so to speak. So I'm just saying that's the lack of continuity I'm seeing in what he's arguing. And what he does have is a large bearing, and maybe in all the cases we've seen so far where they can freeze the weight, I think there was a large bearing involved.
Pivot point.
I mean, move it to a location and have it stay that in the imbalanced position.
The force times the arm would be exactly the same. Force times the arm. And it would stay still, which it did in my video. But if I'd have hung this string with the weight on it from, say, the bottom of the tube at this point, and the same this side, when it was horizontal, it would balance, it wouldn't tend to move. But as soon as it's displaced, like it is here, when you do the measurement, the line of action perpendicular to the pivot point is less on this side than the line of action to the.
Right. So to use his rhetoric, if I did it from the top, it would be exactly the opposite. The side that was less is now more. And so more would mean that it would not balance it because there'd be no incentive to move back up. And so somehow it would just keep spinning. It would be sort of perpetual motion thingy.
Pivot point. Sorry. This side, the combination, the product of the weight and the distance, the arm, is less on this side now than it is.
So you can sort of see with this line here, right? You can see that line, can't you? Yeah. So the line here, you can sort of see that bisects this thing, and there's this extra if I go from the top, and there's less if I go from the bottom. So they're inverse, and that would just totally make this explanation not viable if we concede that it doesn't matter whether I have the weights in the top or I have the weights in the bottom. They're both methods of applying the pressure will cause the oscillation. Both are non-centered to the fulcrum.
On this side. you can see this line of action now is nearer the circumference of the rotation. The circle is the rotation of the thing. It's very close there, whereas here it's getting confusing. It's a lot further in from. It's got a shorter arm. From here to here is the measurement of the arm now.
Right, and if I did from the top, it's a longer arm. So again, that's the problem. The two don't match. And I'm just assuming that it wouldn't matter whether it's top or bottom. The fact is that it's not centered, and therefore the mass would create oscillation. And if it's centered, then it doesn't create oscillation. So I'm just saying this explanation doesn't quite work, because the two would have to realistically be the same in terms of the oscillation can only be created because there's some sort of mass differential. So I think it has more to do with the rotation of the object on its axle than it has to do with whether the masses are centered or not. And it has to do with how much energy it creates and whether it's enough energy to cause an oscillation.
Whereas it's ear to here, there, ear to here. The product of the line of action of the force and the arm is greater on this side now than it is on this side. So
right, and if I tie them from the top, the exact opposite would be true.
So it now will swing back.
So obviously it won't swing back if the line of action thing is the truth, because then there's no reason to, because it's it's heavier than it is lighter on that side, and so therefore it should fall.
Go past the equilibrium point down to there, slow down, and then there's now more force on this side. So it will oscillate to and fro until friction reduces the amplitude of each oscillation. It makes it sound like I know what I'm talking about.
So it'd be nice if there was, yes, a reference, somebody who did know what they were talking about and all that kind of crap. But okay, thank you for drawing this much. This is in the context where we won't actually draw how the force, how we destroy the momentum. How the lever destroys the momentum. That would be the more interesting drawing.
I don't know whether you can see clearly on this, it's a bit confusing. If this is the line of action of the weight when it's suspended from the centre line, it's the same product from here to here as it is from the centre line there to there, exactly the same. So it won't oscillate. It's in equilibrium. But suspending it from the bottom of the tube, there is a difference.
Yeah, and the difference would matter. You would argue that somehow if it's further, that means it's feeling less weight, and that's why it oscillates, is because it's getting lighter as it goes down, and therefore it wants to go back up because it's lighter. There has to be some mechanical reason why that difference matters. And I would argue that if it's the exact opposite effect if I hang from the top, then there's something wrong with the theory, because both hanging from the top or hanging from the bottom will create oscillation.
From here to here is greater than from here to here. That's absolutely true, even though my drawing might not have.
Right, and it's also absolutely true that if I do it from the top, that it's exactly the opposite. So, blah, 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 blah.
I hope it hasn't confused you. But that's how you would work out the torque on the balance and predict what it would do. It's only just the forces acting on each weight, and it's the product of the weight and the arm. In each case, it varies as it moves up and down in the swing.
And all I'm saying is that no, I really think it's just the bearing, and the bigger I make the bearing, the more likely it is I can stop the motion of the lever, and I think that has more to do with it. But I'm just guessing based on the fact that I haven't done enough experiments to know. I mean, to me, it's not that interesting, okay, frankly. So this all got started because they think the rate at which this thing oscillates is something to do with defeating the simple argument that as far as the lever is concerned, a 5 mass twice the distance is exactly the same weight as a 10 mass half the distance, and that's just a fact. And you know, and levers work. They conserve momentum. As it turns out, the weight is completely decided by the motion, the speed. You can just calculate the speed and calculate the fact that the momentum and the weight are in parallel. They're the same thing happens. As the momentum increases, the weight increases. That's correlated quite perfectly, and that would be the sensible thing to understand. So let's just do, for the sake of the argument, so all of these levers he's built and all this stuff he's done, and again, frankly, from the very beginning, okay, the argument was, it's all started with a 5-ton train and a 10-ton train, and the physics girl assertion, okay, that the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour has twice the energy of a 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour. And so levers came up because I made the simple argument, you know, the anti-Leibnizian Newtonian argument, okay, that levers kind of defeat this whole argument because a lever will do the conversion. So what the experiment we really want is something flat. We might get gravity out of this because it just makes a mess. So we put a lever on the floor, okay, and it can move this way, and it doesn't matter. Gravity's not going to change how it moves. And the idea would be is that we have a 5-ton train. Well, let's put it where it should be. Okay. Let's have a 10-ton train here. Okay, so we're going to plow in a 10-ton train. Okay, a 10 mass going 5 velocity. Okay, so inverse mass to velocity ratios. And just have it hit the lever here, and then over here 2 notches away we just have a half mass, okay, the 5 mass, alright, going, and the prediction is that you have to conserve the momentum, that this will decelerate, okay, at a 5 velocity rate, and this will accelerate, okay, at a 10 velocity rate because it's twice the distance. So this moves, for every movement here, this moves twice as much. So it fits perfectly that this would decelerate at exactly the right rate for this is acceleration. And so this fixes the Newton's cradle problem. I can't use a Newton's cradle and convert all of the energy from this object into this object. What I'm going to end up with is reflections. So I'll get less than, okay, the total energy into here, and I'll get extra energy back. So I won't be able to get all the energy into the Newton's cradle, and it won't sustain. It'll be way out of oscillation, way out of resonance, because I'll end up creating 2 sources of energy, and they'll collide with each other and cancel each other. Alright, so this one is just a simple experiment, right? I mean, this has to leave with twice the velocity. Okay, as Professor Lewin would say, nature can't finagle the momentum. This ends up being a 5 mass going 10, and what I have done by kinetic energy theory is I've put in 125 and I've gotten 250 out, and that would be impossible. So obviously the kinetic energy theory needs this to leave less, with less speed, 7 here instead of 5. And then vice versa, you would argue if I did the experiment the opposite way, put the 5 in and let the 10 shoot out, I mean, it should do it with no problem. Are they going to say there's no friction and there's no loss? Does it come out 10 and 5, or does it come out 10 and 3, right, or 2? So 10 mass will leave with some kind of point, whatever the 0.4 equivalent is. I mean, because I have to lose the same amount of energy, right? So I haven't figured that out. But it's just such a it just becomes insensible. I lose energy, I lose momentum going one way. Is the argument they don't lose momentum going the other way? If there's some sort of problem with the lever functioning, shouldn't it dysfunction the same way going both ways? So we don't even have the prediction for what happens to the 10 mass when I put the 5 in. Now, if it perfectly conserves momentum, that's going to be sort of a giveaway, okay? that their argument is a little specious. Anyway, so I'm just saying, okay, all these BROUGH experiments, all of these Gostling experiments now, and this is the experiment we want. Now, I would suggest using pendulums, and maybe there's some way to ensure the velocities. Like you could use BROUGH's spring launcher, which he proved to basically produce exactly what you want to do, which is if you put both masses on at the same time, you can guarantee you get twice the velocity from the lighter mass. And so, all you have to do is put a block in the way, so one of them, they both shoot off, and in one experiment you block this one so it can't hit the target, and the other experiment you block this one so it can't hit the target. And then you'll know you'll have two things with the proper velocities. Now, pendulums swing at just this, this perfect rate and all this kind of stuff, but I mean, this is a little bit more precise. You have to measure the distance height, okay, to make sure that you're going 4 times higher to get twice the velocity. But if you do it right, yes, the idea of just hanging pendulums, okay, so these are pendulums with a string coming down, okay, straight down at these points, and all you're going to do is give one side energy, alright, and let the other side swing out. So you're basically doing a Newton's cradle with the lever in the way. So you're just going to let it oscillate, pushing this one in. It will decelerate, this one will accelerate, alright, it'll go out and then it'll come back down and hit, and you'll basically have an oscillator with a lever being the mitigator, the converter of the one momentum into the other momentum. And yes, I theoretically predict that you will conserve the momentum and it will work. And it's a pretty simple experiment. Yeah, I think as simple as all the other ones they've built, and they haven't built this one. I mean, this is the only thing we're really arguing about, is momentum conserved or isn't it? So if you can prove the lever doesn't conserve momentum, that would be the thing to do. So why don't you do it in this direct way instead of these indirect ways? I mean, talking about how fast it oscillates, and when you know the lever, when his own drawing is explaining why it's a little fudgy about what exactly, when you just lift the object up in gravity, when you just tilt the lever in gravity, that somehow you're changing how much weight is on the lever. If he's conceding that point, then it's not going to get to the point of being a clear experiment. So that context, I guess we can go to the BROUGH video. Now he's talking to other people, which is good, because maybe his video will be on the subject instead of this insane ranting he does about all this other crap. So maybe he'll just talk about the subject. We'll see. We'll see how he behaves when he's arguing with other people. Alright, let's see. Volume issues. I don't know if we have any. Probably have to turn it down a bit, yeah. So, somewhere around there should be suitable. It's almost like, go look at the comments first and see what kind of crap they're saying. To my mind, as long as both cylinders have the same mass circumferentially, then the added mass in the middle won't make enough difference. It's their total average. You're just saying the simplest way to look at it is, what's the average atom doing? So you take the velocity of the average atom in the substance and you say, what's its velocity? What's the average velocity per atom? And that'll tell you how much of a difference there is. But it won't stop somebody complaining. So here we go. Just more of the same. This is Ian Gostling saying this crap. So again, it's a pretty, it's exactly the issue that the idiot complained about his first experiment. Oh, I didn't realize I did the experiment wrong because there was a tiny bit of rotation. And now he has a huge rotational issue, and he's just pretending it away. I mean, the duplicity is just so fucking obvious. Rotation matters when there's a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of rotational difference. But when there's a huge amount of rotational difference and then one of the masses is solid and one of the masses is hollow, he can't understand? The hollow cylinder starts quicker, but the solid one gets a higher speed. So even that doesn't make any sense. It starts quicker, but something stops it from something or other. If the track were longer, the differences would become more clear, I guess. So who knows what he did. So he's all this effort again. So he's doing all of this effort to now prove that somehow it doesn't. An experiment that's been done by physics, literally hundreds of times. I mean, this is the Bruce Yerny guy, or whatever his name is. I mean, he's done these experiments. I mean, every one of the physicists has done these experiments of the difference between a hollow object and a solid object and how they roll. I mean, damn. Why would somebody play with this? Like he's going to prove otherwise. Too silly.
Okay, so this is in response to yesterday's comments.
This whole, what the fuck is it with you and this, again, this 12-year-old, you gotta, slop this. Titty! It's Beavis and Butthead. This is just so fucking childish. And here you are sitting there showing everybody, look at my physics video. God damn. I mean, you're just, what the hell is that?
Comments from White Henny and Mindless Marbles.
Mumbly, 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 mumbly.
Yeah. So he says, Gary has a valid point about the two objects having different moments of inertia relative to their masses. He wouldn't use those words. It is a problem. The half mass is a hollow cylinder, meaning it has higher moment of inertia relative to its mass than the whole mass. This is the same problem as in the previous similar experiment where the half mass was a sawn off pool ball, but in that previous experiment we got totally different results.
Yeah, because the problem was much more slight. Retard.
They were bang in the middle of Gary's prediction and my prediction. Well, it's not really my prediction.
No, they weren't anywhere bang in the middle. That is such a fucking lie. And 19 and 11 is nowhere in the middle. But whatever.
Prediction is it's mainstream science's prediction. Well, aired just in favour of mainstream science's prediction because the flaw in that experiment really wasn't what you were mentioning here, White Annie. It was more a case of that object skidding because it was being accelerated too fast and it couldn't grip the table, so it didn't rotate. So it went faster because it wasn't rotating.
And again, that is true. But if you look at the experiment, both of them are skidding, and one of them has a little bit of rotation.
It skidded, and so that sent the calculations off quite a bit. That's why I wanted to.
So he said quite a bit. I guess he just really doesn't get the concept at all. That it's really just about how much mass is in what condition. So obviously the solid ball, it's going to be a lot less of an issue than when you hollow something. When you hollow something, you're making a dramatic difference. You're forcing all the atoms to travel the larger circumference. All the atoms have to travel the larger circumference. It takes much more energy for them to travel the larger circumference.
With objects that wouldn't skid and would be the same shape, which explains the question that Mindless Marbles raises. He thought it was strange that one of the cylinders wasn't hollow. But I really don't get why that's puzzling, because it's obvious.
Okay, so it's just funny that he doesn't get okay, at all. He just doesn't get this concept at all. I mean, I drew this yesterday. This is after I posted my video. And so I can only assume that he saw that. Yeah, you're not missing anything. So he's just reading the comments poorly. But whatever. He complains about how poorly I do it, and he does it pretty poorly also. Where is... Well, I guess I have to pause. I have to find the thing to clean the damn board. Alright, back. Alright, so the simple point is that you're going to roll two things that have the same circumference, okay, and the two objects are going to have different masses proportional to this part missing in the middle. So the extra mass is going to be this stuff you're going to stick here in the middle. And the point is all the extra you added okay, is in this part that's moving very slowly, okay, as it rotates. This has to move very fast. So it's just like the lever or the gear argument. I mean, you're really just saying how far out is it. If it's further out, it essentially weighs more. So the further out from the center it is, the more the mass weighs in a way. And it takes more energy to get the same amount of displacement, okay, in terms of its rotational displacement from the center. And so this takes less energy, half the energy that this takes. So these atoms are only consuming half the amount of energy that these atoms are consuming in terms of the rotational energy being taken. So in a sense, this is half the energy in here, and it's twice the energy out here. This has all twice the energy, and it doesn't have any half the energy. So all of the atoms are moving with the 2x, and in here half the atoms, okay, it has the 2x atoms, okay, but the other half are just 1x, and when you divide that by 2 you get some sort of number, and so it's like a third less energy in rotation in this object per atom than there is in this one. Per atom, more energy is being consumed by rotation than in this one, because the averages are different. I mean, come on. It's pretty easy to understand. But he's not, even though it's, again, why? He thinks, he has great reverence for mindless marbles, so you think he would take the fact that marbles is finding fault, or conceding an issue, would be something he would take pause and give it a couple of days and maybe think about it.
Why?
But no, he's Brozo.
That's the case. The difficulty of trying to make two objects of different masses but the same shape. Well, they have to be exactly 2-to-1 different masses, 2-to-1 ratio different masses.
Right, and so for these experiments, like I said, for levers, I don't think it matters, frankly, the shape. So just put two objects, where the 10 mass goes, put two 5s, and put one 5 where the 5 mass is supposed to go, and frankly the experiment should work pretty much okay. It shouldn't make that big a difference in how it functions.
But of exactly the same shape in all respects. Apparently, according to you and mindless marbles here, I think, we should somehow expect them to be both exactly the same shaped cylinders as well. One cannot be a solid, cannot be infilled with lead, because it will make a dramatic difference. So let me show you this that seems to prove the opposite.
Alright, so, it's just, again, so now he's arguing again with conventional physics is proven mechanics. So, yeah, why bother with that? I mean, why are you trying to do that?
That the point that you're raising is such a minor point. You would need really sensitive equipment to measure it.
So this is, again, bizarre in terms of he's seen these Bruce Yearney experiments. He's seen, I played the ones from Professor Julius Sumner did it. Professor Lewin has done it. I mean, these are classic rolling down ramp experiments. Classic.
It seems virtually immeasurable. the difference, as far as I can determine anyway. Just using gravity instead of a lever to propel the two objects the same distance as in that experiment. If you're propelling them over a longer distance, then yes, I'm quite certain that there would be a more obvious difference between the two, one being a cylinder and the other being technically a disc, I believe. But that isn't the case. The experiment was measuring over about 12 centimeters total distance.
Let's understand that the two masses will fall at the same rate, okay, because that's how gravity works. So if you're going to use gravity, it's not going to see the mass differences. And the circumference is the same, so it's not going to see that either, in the sense of it does, unless you do the direct conversion. So I guess I don't know what he rolled it down or how he moved the objects, but you really do have to allow some constant force or some known force, because then you get back into the issue that the fastest one has a huge distance advantage. Whatever one's going faster will of course have a distance advantage. So I don't know exactly how he got the objects moving, but we'll see.
If I remember right. Anyway, I recreated the experiment. I still had the same materials, dug them all out, and I made an experiment which is pretty obvious how it's working. It doesn't really need any explanation from me. And it speaks for itself that agreeing with Gary, saying that Gary's got a point, is simply not true. It's not a valid point. It might be valid from an extreme technical point of view. Yes, I'm not denying that one has greater moment of inertia relative to the masses.
I mean, it's almost, it's not twice, but I mean, it's a substantial difference in what the average atom is doing in the two objects, meaning that kind of obviously, okay, per atom, a lot more energy has been taken from the lighter object per atom.
I'm not denying that. All I'm saying is it's such an irrelevant point. You could also argue that one of them has different air resistance because the ends on one, the ends are open, and the other, the ends are flat.
No, you couldn't argue that would be relevant because the air resistance is so minor, because the velocities are so minor. It's ridiculous almost to argue that air resistance is having much of an effect at all on this particular experiment, especially with masses reaching almost a pound or two.
I don't know enough about aerodynamics to figure out in what way that would affect them. But you might as well cite things like that and say, well, one's going to go slower or faster due to the end shape being different. I don't know. But again, it would be utterly possible.
Then why did you bother? Again, why did you bother making them the same shape if you're changing the aerodynamics? Blah, 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 blah. So they're not the same shape because one has open ends and all. I mean, it's just such a nonsense. And this is a guy who couldn't understand the difference between a round mass and a frisbee. A baseball and a frisbee. He couldn't understand the difference between those two things aerodynamically. But he's worried about the open ends of a cylinder rolling, thinking that might have something to do with something.
Pointless to argue that because clearly it does not make a difference. The experiment came out exactly as predicted.
So again, exactly as you predicted, and it came out almost exactly as I predicted. Okay, when this bullshit configuration wasn't used.
I could have slid them, and that was intended to be the next phase of the experiment, to put them on a slippy plastic sheet and just slide them, because Gary changed his tune at some point and said that would be a better experiment. Ideally it should be done where they...
I didn't change any tune. I never suggested rotating things was a great idea, so that's just absolute bullshit. That came up with the first experiment you did 2 years ago, as I pointed out, because the faster one was skidding and the slower one wasn't.
Intentionally made to skid so they wouldn't be rolling, then we wouldn't have this rolling inertia. I can't remember what the term is. I'm not very technically minded really on these matters, but you know what I mean. If they aren't turning, then that wouldn't be an issue if they were just placed on the plastic mat and slid end on. Okay, anyway, I'll just...
Yeah, I think more ideally is you take advantage of pendulums and the fact that they do reduce the amount of friction and store energy very well. And so why not take advantage of some mechanism that actually works in terms of eliminating this friction issue, which we want to try to minimize. Blah, 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 blah.
up and let you see what I've done, so you can judge for yourself. I've done them fast and the normal speed, and then in slow mo in each case.
Great.
And
Yeah,
whatever. And one or two of them come out in your favour, a tiny bit. But I'm not going to bother frame counting because it's just so obvious to the naked eye. And the sound, the audio, you can hear that they hit together or virtually together. And so your point seems a bit moot, to be honest. Okay, I'll love you and leave you with that. Bye. You should, Rick.
Okay, so yes, he's rolling them like a millimeter. I mean, frankly, this is just too ridiculous, right? He's going to move them this far, and say he can, he's measuring the amount of difference. And frankly, yes, you do have to roll a little further than almost nothing.
Recognize that the experiment still set up as it was before, except I've locked off the bar, taped it down there so it can't move, so that we can test just using gravity, see how much difference it makes. So basically,
so in the case of where the bar does the pushing, obviously it's much more energy being put in, so any difference is going to make a hell of a lot more difference the faster they're going. So gravity is such a tiny amount of force that they're actually collecting that you're not going to be able to see the difference because it's such a tiny amount of force. Ugh. I mean, it's a percentage difference in how much rotational, how much momentum is being consumed in the creation of the rotation. And you're just saying, yes, obviously the more energy the objects have, the more it's going to matter. So he's just tilted this a little bit, like an inch. He's going to let them roll at a much slower speed than they do go in the experiment, so it's a much smaller percentage. And so he's really just saying, fuck technicalities, okay? I'm not interested. This has to do with his quick releases. Everything he does it, without taking it seriously as, well, the fact is it's important.
this grey board, this big grey board that it was originally mounted on, I set that to the same distance as before, because originally we had this here, and it at the 4.5 inch mark, and it measured about 8.5 centimeters from the edge of that to the front of the tray, 8.5 centimeters. So this grey board, the original grey board, it's mounted. Just walk on it for a minute. It's a very thick board. It's mounted. It's resting on this whiteboard here with this piece of wood here fixed to it.
All right. So he's going down a tiny little ramp and then letting them roll. Okay, which again is almost ridiculous because we know as they roll they're losing their energy. I mean, too stupid. Nobody does the experiment that way, Brozo. They always do it staying on the ramp. They don't take things off the ramp. I mean, just too stupid.
Act as a hinge, because I'm going to lift up the other end of the grey board.
Okay, the whole board is going to lift up. All right.
Using this
That's okay.
board taped to it there, fixed to it, so it's
Okay,
keep
that's
moving.
okay.
So it's like a lever. Oops, like that. Yeah, okay. So then it'll tip these forward using gravity instead of the spring force.
But he's always doing it. Why? What is he doing? Too ridiculous, right? So instead of letting it roll, take this tin out of the way and let them go the entire distance, because you're putting so little energy in. So yes, let them keep rolling, and which one hits the end first will tell you. And that's with a tiny bit of gravitational energy, right? He's only got a couple of inches of gravitational energy put in here versus the spring that was pushing them quite quickly. So again, just such bullshit. He just doesn't, like I said, he just doesn't care about any. But look at all this trouble he's gone to do this. All right, when what he ought to be doing is, simply putting 2 objects at the 10 location and 1 object at the 5 location, and then do your experiment. Not complicated.
Note that both these objects have similar rotational momentum, or whatever the phrase would be. Both objects continue to rotate.
Right, because it's gravity and they're going to fall at the same rate. Duh. The whole point of the lever is that it's hitting one of them with twice the velocity. So yeah, the fact that they're hitting close to the same time doesn't mean much, because again, you're not providing enough distance for you to see how the ratio works as you increase the force. How much momentum they hit with. Ugh. I mean, in this case, obviously the 5 mass is going to hit with less momentum. The half mass hits with less momentum, because you put the same energy into both. I mean, the force of gravity. The 5 mass is, wait a minute. Yeah, the 5 mass is going the same speed as the 10 mass. So obviously the 5 mass has a lot less momentum. Okay, it collected a lot less energy. When you force them to have the same energy is when you'll see the difference.
When they stop. Even though, see what I mean? It's not just because one is a...
Well, it's unfortunate. I guess these labels might not be the same size, but it seems obvious that this one spins more than this one does, but whatever.
solid, effectively.
So when they stop, they're still spinning. You can see this one spins more than this one, indicating more of its momentum is in rotation.
Doesn't seem to be making any difference.
I mean, it's a, you know, it seems quite clear. This one continues to spin more than this one.
To anyway, it obviously isn't making any difference to the experiment, is it?
It's obvious that this experiment isn't designed to find the difference.
They start off the same and they end the same. Oh, it's gone out of sync, the timing now. Okay.
I don't think he was going to be that silly he's lifting the lever. He doesn't have it in place and then hold the objects and then release the objects. He's lifting the whole panel. So you have to consider what difference that makes. Obviously the heavier mass is collecting more gravitational energy in the same units of time than the 5 mass is, and they both have to overcome their friction. So who knows if that has an effect. Okay, whatever. So I guess that's all he's going to do is just replay the same. That one definitely hit first that time. So again, this one was first. But whatever. Again, so he thinks he's going to undo what is, like I said, he's debunking Bruce Yearney and telling him it doesn't happen. When we already know it does happen. Clearly, bang bang. Bang bang there too, but whatever. So I can't believe he just did this, you know, let's just do the same shit over and over and over, and we won't do any precise measurement I mean, clearly bang bang. Clearly there's a difference. Bang. Way off there. I mean, that was way the fuck. Let's redo that one. So I mean, this is just so useless to show a bunch of experiments that have all kinds of variety in them. But clearly, this one's ahead. Clearly. Clearly ahead again. I mean, that isn't an insignificant difference. Okay, here's the same point in time. This one's almost twice the distance away as this one. Not an insignificant difference for such a short distance. And again, if you magnify the amount of force you're throwing them with, okay, the more it's going to matter. The more this difference increases. Again, almost twice there. No matter where clear. No, too fast. Oh, Jesus. Okay, clear difference. So if you go back to the cue ball one, you'll see that the pool ball, billiard ball. I mean, the rotation is tiny in terms of the one object's rotation versus the other object. And this, he says, is not significant. And, he says this is insignificant and somehow that was significant. And the only reason why he's saying that is because one result is better for him and the other result is bad for him. And that's it. Well, that one was weird, right? Because this one's way ahead. So look, this whole lifting idea, maybe you lifted one side first and the other side second. Who knows what that catch is? Who knows if there's dents in this material over time where these dark marks are? Who knows? I mean, he's tried to make this a high friction surface. And so maybe it also is a dentable surface. Who knows what? But there's no reason why this should be ahead of the other one, right? No reason at all. No good reason. No physics reason. So how did you make that happen? How did so again, he's just proving his experiments suck because they're not even consistent. It's a complete reversal. This one's somehow moving much faster. I mean, come on, Brozo. I mean, what's his explanation? How did he do that? How did he make one leave first? Alright, that's back to being the other side goes first. So, whatever. Just crap. Another crappy experiment, proving nothing. Except that Brozo likes to do crappy experiments. So that one's obviously way ahead again. Bang. And then this hasn't banged yet. So what value is this? So all this editing, all the bullshit, and instead of doing an experiment that actually proves that you can't use a lever, okay, to convert the energy from a 5-ton, 5-mass object moving 10 velocity into a 10-mass object moving 5 velocity, or vice versa. You can't do that. Oh, fuck. Just there's another one where, okay, so 90% of them do this. This one hits first, and then in 1% or whatever the number was, who knows how that one we saw, it does exactly the opposite. And so we're supposed to say, yeah, this is a really great experiment because each time you do it, you get a different result. Fuck. Alright, so that was horrible and useless and terrible. Alright, so we just got those. The hollow cylinder starts quicker, but the solid one gets the higher speed. So again, that really didn't happen. So anyway, if the tracks were longer, the difference would become clear, I guess. Well, they'd obviously be more distinct in some of those cases because you keep multiplying that difference. And so by the time they hit, the difference would be rather significant. And that is essentially the same as adding more energy, right? So you can understand that as you allow it to roll further down a hill, it goes faster and faster, and that would start duplicating what it would be if you put more energy in at their very initial start. And so you'll get this bigger difference depending on how you launch them. But the fact is, you're just saying that there's a portion of the energy that is in the rotation. And again, you could sort of understand it that if I rolled them over a surface, got them rolling, did all of that, and then allowed them to fly into space, allowed them to fly off the cliff, if one wasn't rotating, obviously it would end up having more velocity this way because none of its energy is caught up spinning. The spin is real energy. The spin of the blade has to come out of the linear velocity. It has to go slower to be able to rotate. Rotation is real energy consumed in rotation. It's not friction, but it's a kind of dampening drain on the velocity. Some of the velocity has to be used to do the rotating. Alright. So, whatever. And for him to deny that truth is just too fucking silly. Okay, so he doesn't have a whole bunch to say here. He usually has a whole fucking pile of crap to pontificate about. We don't have any of that. Alright, so did I not show all of that video? I'm sorry. Yeah, see? That's unfortunate. But that's live TV. It's not live.
Objects continue to rotate when they stop.
Okay, so I guess I'll show you a little tiny bit of it. It really wasn't interesting. It was incredibly boring, actually. This is what you saw. Okay, and then you get to see it in slow motion, and then I paused it at the right moments in a couple of cases. This one hit, this one didn't hit. Obviously, this one is behind, blah, 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 blah. And then when they hit, you can see the label still spinning more on this one than the other one. So watch the label. The label spins a lot more on this one than that one, indicating there's more energy in its rotation. Alright, so sorry about that. I mean, it was boring, with the video. It must have been really boring without it. But shit happens, as they say. He just did the same thing over and over. So he kept doing trials, and in one of the trials, this one actually hits first. Which, there's just no way to explain that. So obviously not a perfect experiment. Now those two hit at the same time. So I don't know what to say, like 85 or 90% of them, this one over here hits first, indicating this one has lost more of its velocity to its rotation. Okay. So let's see what this one does. Yeah, this one's definitely way ahead. You can see this one's no gap here. This one's still got a good gap. Okay, this one definitely hit first, blah, blah, blah. And then you can see some spin here. And it seems clear there's more spin here. Okay, even after they hit. Alright, so enough of that crap. Sorry about the technical malfunction. Yeah. But like I said, it was really nothing to see. Alright, so I'll take a pause and see if there's any last words on this. But it's just, it's amazing the little crap they get caught up in. Alright, so since I'm here and I have the board, I might as well point out again the kind of experiment I'm saying that we're really waiting for. It's just this, see if I can draw it. You know, we're just going to have a lever, alright, and the idea is that we hang pendulums, you know, down, alright, and these proper positions, so you can put a, you know, the heavy mass here, right, it's from the center of gravity. From the center of gravity, you lift it up and you swing it into the pendulum. So you can do either way. Just put some 10 in and you should get the 5 out. You should get twice the velocity here. So whatever you put in energy here with the twice as massive object, you should get twice the velocity out here, okay, with the half mass object. And that's all you want to see, is that, well, if I can do that conversion, that proves the kinetic energy theory wrong. So it doesn't matter what the velocity is, as long as this leaves with twice the velocity, you've proven the kinetic energy theory can't be true because it's free energy. So that's the simple experiment we're looking for. It's just 10-ton train, you know, right? 10 mass going 5, okay, and we want to see that it doesn't produce a 5 going 10. And that's what we want to see, okay, to prove that somehow, first, levers don't conserve momentum, and they do conserve whatever kinetic energy is. And I'm going to argue that the answer is solid, is the rocket ship example again. They keep, you know, I gotta, yeah, I should find that email. Somebody gave me an explanation for the rocket ship thing, and it was just so bad. You know, it's in more than one way. You know, if I shoot the 10 mass, okay, going 5 out one side, and I have the 5 mass going 10 out the other side, they say, okay, this is twice the energy. That's what they say, that I pushed out this side. Alright? Yet, it won't turn the ship. Okay, the ship is going to say you did the same thing. It's the same momentum this way, same momentum that way. Momentum is going to turn the ship. And this kinetic energy number is not going to mean a damn thing. As far as the spaceship is concerned, these are the same amounts of energy. So it's the only real energy. Momentum is the only real energy, and this kinetic energy stuff is a fable. It's made up. It's synthetic. It's not even virtual energy. It's nothing. It's nonsense. It doesn't exist. And these experiments prove it doesn't exist. Alright, so maybe I'll find that email. Alright, so here was, he quoted the question, and then this is the answer he provided. A for answer. The answer to that question lies in the understanding the principles of momentum and kinetic energy. So that sounds like tripe. While the dime may have a higher velocity than the bottle of Coke, yes, 1,000 times faster, its significantly lower mass compensates for the velocity difference. So yes, it's momentum. Big M, little v, big V, little m. So you're not saying anything yet. According to the principle of conservation of momentum, so there is no principle, apparently that's what they're proving. Okay, Brozo and Ian don't believe there is any principle of conservation of momentum, that nothing conserves momentum. Springs don't do it, levers don't do it, gears don't do it, nothing conserves momentum. Okay, the total momentum before and after the ejection of the object should be the same. That's right. So if you have more energy going out one side, then your spaceship should turn, because you did more work that way than you did that way. It doesn't turn. However, when considering kinetic energy, which is dependent on both the mass and the velocity, I mean, duh, they're both dependent on the same mv. It's just the 1/2 and a square are added. A 1/2 and a square aren't real things. The only real things are the mass and the velocity. The real things can't be different real things, right? So the real part has to be the same, mass and velocity. You're putting the same mass velocity, and you're just coming up with a different calculated number. The added parts have no reality that anybody can define. You can't define this squared velocity thing, just like you couldn't define a square on a mass. How do I mass square? the bottle of Coke would have a significantly higher kinetic energy, says you. So again, it's just an assertion. It has a higher kinetic energy, but it doesn't do any work. So in the spaceship example, the whole argument is the extra kinetic energy means nothing to the spaceship. It doesn't see it. It can't find it. It doesn't exist. That's the whole paradox being described, is that you're saying it has more energy, yet the ship that produced the more energy isn't doing the equal and opposite reaction thing. So you're basically completely annihilating Newton's third law. All right. I mean, it's just a silly thing to say. The bottle of Coke would have a significantly higher kinetic energy compared to the dime. Meaning what? Yes, if I square the velocities, that's true. But if I don't square them, it's not true. Therefore, the kinetic energy formula is not contradicted in the scenario. Of course, it's contradicted. You're saying there's 1,000 times more energy, 1,000 times more watts of heat. If it was just heat, there's 1,000 watts going one way, there's 1 watt going the other way. How does the spaceship not turn in that circumstance? It has to turn. But the fact is it doesn't. The NASA knows it doesn't. I think most people know it doesn't, because they know that's not how it works. Thrust is momentum. Thrust isn't kinetic energy. Therefore, i.e., you're stuck, okay, with your silly notion of a reality that isn't verified by the elemental experiment. I do an elemental experiment to say, let's find the kinetic energy. Let's look at it. Let's watch it work. And we watch it do absolutely nothing. What do you think of this answer? I think it's just complete crap. Yeah. So, and he said here, this is the funny part, right? So I didn't even notice it when I read it the second time. The bottle of Coke would have a significantly higher kinetic energy compared to the dime. So he said it backwards. The dime has the significantly higher kinetic energy. It has the velocity squared, the 1,000 squared versus the 1 squared. 1 squared is 1. 1,000 squared is a really big number. So, what am I going to say? Sorry, wrong answer. Okay, sorry, not a good answer. Sorry, not even close to an answer. You haven't explained the paradox. The paradox is I'm just saying that I don't know, we haven't heard the Brozosians. What did the Brozosians think? I shoot the 5-ton train going 10 out this side of the ship. I shoot the 10 going 5 out the other side of the ship. What does the spaceship do? Are they going to concede it just continues on just as it was? It's going to be going exactly the same. There's not going to be any deflection at all because I sent the same energy out, and that's the end. I didn't do anything to change this's balance of energy because I sent the same amount this way as I sent that way, and therefore the ship can't possibly move any different. But again, they say I generated 1,000 times more energy in one direction than I did the other. Well, in that case, it's only twice. The dime and the Coke is just a way of illustrating the bullet and the gun, just saying, let's take it to the extreme. So again, these are all arguments. They haven't come anywhere close. Again, I could do the gun thing over and over again, right? I mean, 2 guns inside of each other. Okay. What do these Einsteins say happens? Okay, I have 2 guns inside of each other, 1 single charge. I shoot the charge, I get the recoil of the gun, 2 joules, 2 joules. Okay, then I take a zip gun and I fire 2 bullets, okay, 1,000 times less mass. Okay, same exact explosion, I get 2,000 joules and 2,000 joules. Okay, 4,000 joules from the explosion here, 4 joules here. How does the same explosion create such a vast difference in the outcome? That is, I'm putting in a fixed amount of bang, okay, and I'm getting a huge difference in the bang out. Could they draw that? Ian, can you draw this, Ian, and explain it? Explain how your kinetic energy works? Alright, So, another video. Oh, God. This goes on and on. Anyway, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. Just... shit people. Shit people. That's, yeah, that's enough. Should draw that. Shit people.